All right, ready to dive in. Today, it's Parkinson's disease.
Oh, wow, Parkinson's.
Yeah, and we always think tremors, right?
Right, tremors, shaking.
But there's so much more to it.
There
We're
is.
talking like cognitive decline,
Yeah,
mood problems, blood pressure issues, even sleep can be
it's a
affected.
whole body thing, yeah.
It's wild. And to really understand it, we're looking at this article from Assay Genie, Decoding Parkinson's
Well,
disease.
that's a good one.
It really is. Lots of good info. So first, picture your brain.
Okay.
Deep inside, there's this area, the substantia nigra.
Right.
It's basically mission control for movement.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And in there, you have these cells that make dopamine.
Dopamine.
And
right.
dopamine,
Yeah.
it's like the brain's messenger for smooth movement.
So without enough, things get kind of jerky.
Exactly, yeah. The
Oh.
signals get all messed up. Tremors, stiffness, slow movement.
Yeah.
It all comes from that.
Wow. So brain cells dying, not enough dopamine.
Yeah.
That's a bad combo.
It is.
But then there's this other thing, Lewy bodies.
Ah, yes. Lewy bodies. They're these clumps of protein, alpha-synuclein, and they build up in the brain cells.
Okay, so instead of a smooth running machine, it's all gummed up.
Exactly, like gunk in the gears.
Got it. So the big question, why does this all happen? Bad genes, environment, what is it?
That's the million-dollar question. It seems to be both genes and environment.
Bit of both.
Yeah, so researchers have found certain genes linked to Parkinson's.
Okay, so if you have those genes, you're guaranteed to get it.
No, not guaranteed, but your risk is higher.
Oh, okay, so genes are just part of it.
Right. And then there's the environment, too.
What kind of environmental stuff are we talking about?
Well, studies suggest that exposure to certain pesticides, heavy metals, that kind of thing, it might increase the risk for some people.
So it's you might have the genes, but then something in the environment kind of triggers it.
It's possible, yeah.
Yeah.
We're still figuring it all out.
This is where it gets really interesting, Fennel. The article talks about non-motor symptoms. So these are things that happen even before you see any movement issues.
Exactly. And this is why Parkinson's is so much more than just, the shaking and the tremors.
Okay, so what kind of non-motor symptoms are we talking about?
Well, things like cognitive decline, mood swings, sleep problems, they can all be early signs.
Whoa, hold on. Cognitive decline, you mean like memory problems? Could that lead to dementia?
Yeah, it can in some cases. It's not always dementia, but it can be a part of Parkinson's, yeah.
Wow. That's a lot to process. You mentioned mood swings, too. Is that common with Parkinson's?
It is, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Depression and anxiety are pretty common.
I can imagine. It must be tough dealing with the physical changes and then the mood stuff on top of it.
Absolutely. And then the sleep problems, those are incredibly common, too.
Okay, what kind of sleep problems are we talking?
Well, everything from insomnia to, really vivid, intense dreams where people actually move around in their sleep.
So if someone's listening and thinking, wait a minute, do I have Parkinson's? What should they do?
The best thing is to talk to their doctor. Always a good first step.
And for people who have been diagnosed, what can they do to manage it all? Is there a cure?
There's no cure yet, but there are treatments that can really help with the symptoms and improve quality of life.
So let's talk treatments. The article mentions levodopa as the gold standard.
Yeah, levodopa is basically a precursor to dopamine. It gives the brain what it needs to make more of that smooth movement messenger.
Oh, that's clever. But is it safe to take long term?
Well, there can be downsides. Over time, it can become less effective, and people can experience these on-off periods where the symptoms come back between doses.
Oh, I see. And it can also cause dyskinesias, right? Those involuntary movements.
Yeah, exactly. It's a balancing act, trying to find the right dosage and manage the side effects.
Okay, so levodopa is not perfect. What other options are out there?
There are other medications, like dopamine agonists and MAOB inhibitors, and there's deep brain stimulation, too.
Deep brain stimulation? That sounds intense.
It is. It involves implanting electrodes in the brain.
Wow, so that's a whole other level of treatment.
Yeah, it can be really effective
Yeah.
for some people.
So there's medication, there's surgery. It's not just about popping pills, though, right? The article talks about a holistic approach.
Exactly, yeah. Things like physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, they can all make a huge difference.
So it's about treating the whole person, not just the Parkinson's.
That's the goal.
Okay, so we've covered the causes, the symptoms, the treatments. What about the future? Any big breakthroughs on the horizon?
Oh, absolutely. There's so much exciting research happening right now. We'll get into that after a quick break. So much cool research happening with Parkinson's.
Yeah, before the break, you mentioned some breakthroughs.
Oh, right. Immunotherapy, for one.
Immunotherapy, I've heard of that. But how does it work with Parkinson's?
Well, the idea is to, Train the immune system to attack those Lewy bodies, those alpha-synuclein clumps.
So it's like boosting your body's defenses.
Exactly, yeah. Help it fight the disease itself.
I like it. Anything else?
Gene therapy is another one.
Gene therapy, isn't that, like, really futuristic?
It is kinda, but it's getting closer to reality all the time.
So how does it work?
It's basically using viruses, but harmless ones, to deliver genes to the brain.
Okay, so these genes would, like, fix the problem.
Yeah, the idea is they could fix faulty genes or boost dopamine production.
Wow, so you're basically reprogramming the brain.
In a way, yeah. It's still early stages, though.
I can imagine. Messing with genes seems kind of risky.
There are risks, for sure,
Huh.
but scientists are working really hard to make it safe.
Makes sense. So we've got immunotherapy, gene therapy. What about stem cells? Aren't those supposed to be like a miracle cure for everything?
Stem cells are definitely promising. Remember those dopamine-producing cells that die off? Well, stem cells could potentially replace them.
So it's like hitting the reset button on the brain.
Yeah, that's the hope. It's still very complex, though.
Yeah, I bet. So much research, so many possibilities. But what's the biggest obstacle, you think?
Honestly, I think it's that we still don't fully understand what causes Parkinson's in the first place.
Right, so until we figure that out, it's hard to find a real cure.
It is. But even without a cure, there's so much we can do to improve people's lives.
So for someone listening who's just been diagnosed or has a loved one with Parkinson's, what's your message of hope?
You're not alone. There are so many people out there living with Parkinson's and so many resources to help.
And with all this research happening, the future looks pretty bright.
It really does. We're making progress every day.
Okay, so we've talked about causes, symptoms, treatments, and all this amazing research. But before we wrap up, we need to talk about autonomic dysfunction.
Ah, yes. That's when the autonomic nervous system gets disrupted.
The autonomic nervous system, that's like all the behind-the-scenes stuff, right?
Right. Things like blood pressure, digestion, bladder control.
So it's like all those things start going haywire.
Yeah, basically. But there are ways to manage it.
Okay, good to know. You know, with all the challenges of Parkinson's, what inspires you to keep working in this field?
The people. Seeing how resilient they are, how they keep fighting and living their lives.
Yeah, there seems to be a real sense of community.
There really is. And it extends to the researchers and clinicians, too, everyone working towards a cure.
So even though there's still a lot we don't know, there's this amazing sense of hope and determination.
Absolutely.
Are there any organizations you'd recommend for people who want to learn more?
Oh, yeah. The Michael J. Fox Foundation and the Parkinson's Foundation are both great.
Perfect. We'll link to those in the show notes. You know, it's really amazing to think about how far we've come with Parkinson's research. Even without a cure, there's so much hope.
I agree. And it's not just about a cure, it's about making life better for people living with Parkinson's now.
Right. Like all those non-motor symptoms we talked about, treating things like depression and sleep problems, that can make a huge difference.
It really can. It's about treating the whole person, you know? It takes a whole team of doctors and therapists.
So it's a real partnership between the patient and their healthcare team.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one thing you wish everyone knew about Parkinson's?
I think the biggest misconception is that it's just about tremors. People don't realize how many other symptoms there are and how much it impacts every aspect of life.
It's like a whole body disease, not just a movement disorder.
Exactly. The more we understand it, the better we can support people with Parkinson's.
Well said. So, for our listeners, what's your main takeaway message?
You're not alone. There's a whole community out there, and there's so much research happening. There's reason to be hopeful.
It's inspiring to see all that hope and determination. You've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us. Check out the show notes for those resources we mentioned. The more you know about Parkinson's, the better you can advocate for yourself or your loved ones. Until next time, stay curious. It's really amazing to think about how far we've come with Parkinson's research. Even without a cure, there's so much hope.
I know, right? And it's not all about finding that cure. It's about making life better for people right now.
Absolutely. Like dealing with those non-motor symptoms, that can make a world of difference.
Huge difference. Treating the depression, the anxiety, the sleep problems, it all adds up.
It really does. It's about the whole person, not just the disease, right?
Exactly. And it takes a team, you know, doctors, therapists, everyone working together.
A real partnership.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it.
So as we wrap up, what's one thing you really wish people understood about Parkinson's?
You know, I think the biggest misconception is that it's just about the tremors. People don't realize how much more there is to it.
Right. It affects so much more than just movement.
So much more. And the more we understand it, the better we can help.
Well said. So, for our listeners, what's your takeaway message?
You are not alone. There's a whole community out there and so much research happening. There is real reason to be hopeful.
It's inspiring, that hope and determination. Thanks for sharing all this with us today.
Of course, happy to do it.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Parkinson's disease. Be sure to check out those resources we mentioned. And remember, knowledge is power. Until next time, stay curious.